Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Weekend Watch Repair. My name is Adam. We got a cool one on the bench today. This is a Seiko Sea-Lion M330 from May of 1968. This is a watch I've had in my project drawer for some time. I bought it on eBay, bought it at a really good price, and it's an all original watch. The case does show its age. There's definitely some marks on it, but it's untouched, unpolished. Looks to be in all original condition. Obviously, I don't have the original bracelet for it, but the watch itself is a survivor. So this is a one-piece case. As you saw there on the case back, it says open through glass. Just taking a look at the state of this case, and it actually not terribly dirty. It's not bad, but this thing's seen some mileage. This is a cushion case style case. All the corners are still sharp. Everything looks good. So yeah, this is an interesting project. So we're going to go ahead and check the rollover here and see if I inch close to midnight. I kind of went past it, but it was looked to be within a minute or two, which is fantastic. And then there is a semi quick set for the day, which you operate by rotating the watch backwards past midnight for about 2 hours until you see the day kind of bump, and then you can go again. So there we go. Thursday to Friday. That seemed to work good. We're going to go ahead and test it one more time. See where it goes Friday, and then it kind of jumps and comes back to Friday. Then you can go forward, and there's Saturday. That all looks pretty good. There's a quick set for the date on this watch, and that is operated by pushing in the crown. So we're going to go ahead and check that. And all that appears to be working. I don't know if you noticed, but the seconds hand stopped while we were moving the time. This watch does have a hack feature. And so there we go. This is a proof model 1968 case. And we'll go into the proof here in a bit, and we'll go into that DX, what that represents also. But since this is a one-piece case, I need to use my little claw tool to grab a hold of this crystal. And sometimes these can be kind of a pain. I'm going to give it a little bit of force here before we try more drastic methods, but it popped off. And there we go. You can see kind of how that claw is grabbing that crystal. And I apologize for that piece of dirt or something you see on the lens there, kind of just below center 6 o'clock there on that first camera. I didn't even notice that while I was working on this thing. I probably need to pay a little bit closer attention to it. And it hangs around for a minute, so I apologize. It drove me nuts when I was editing this video. But we're going to go ahead and pull these hands off. Those hands look like they're in great shape. You notice this dial on there, it says DX, and that represents deluxe. And as I remove the stem and loosen the locking ring and pull this watch out of the case, back in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, Seiko really was experimenting with different designs and kind of a bunch of different things, and they would mark some of their watches DX. Which they'd said meant deluxe, and that could have meant one of several different things. It, either textured or iridescent dials, applied indices, maybe painted hands, which this watch here has applied indices. It's got an iridescent dial, and so that's kind of what they were going for, and it was meant to as more of a marketing thing than anything else. Just say this watch kind of has a little bit of something extra over a base model. Mechanically, there's really no difference, but it was cosmetic, was what that DX represented. So we go ahead and loosen the two dial feet screws. We go ahead and lift this dial off this movement. You can see that dust still there, bugging me. So there we go. It looks like that is an original dial spacer. It's pretty cool. So if we flip this over, the case serial begins with 8.5, dial begins with 8.4. So those 1968, and they're 1 month apart. That's all fantastic. Now I'm going to go ahead and put some wind in this watch since we couldn't wind it before. This is an automatic only. So we're going to go ahead and put some wind in it and put it on the time grapher and take a look. As you can see, it's running pretty slow. Beat error's fine. Amplitude's actually better than what I expected. And this thing just appears to be in need of a service. All the testing and all the inspection that we've done thus far in these time grapher readings, that's all fantastic, especially for a watch of this age. We didn't see any the watchmaker marks in the case back. I don't know if this thing has ever been serviced. We're going to go ahead and get this done. So the first thing we're going to do is remove this rotor. This is held on by 2 screws, and it almost looks like there's thread locker on them. They were pretty tight. But actually, you know what? I think I figured out a way to solve that stupid dust problem we have here. Check that out. There we go. Fixed, right? Now it won't bother us anymore. You see? No more dust. So that fixed it. Lesson learned for later. So now we've got that off, we need to remove this ring holding down the day wheel. And these have a rounded side and a flat side, and the rounded side belongs down, which this one was. And with the rounded side down, you can get a tool underneath it to go ahead and lift that up and pull it off. And once it's out of the way, we'll just go ahead and pull the day wheel off with some Rodico. Now we can begin disassembly of the dial side. That begins with this cover plate, which is held on by 3 screws. And I don't know if you caught it before, but as you see me pull this plate off and begin disassembly here, this is a proof model watch. And especially among Seiko folks, you may hear a bunch of different things about this is a proof, or this is a resist, or this is a proof, or whatever. And what they're referring to is in 1968, the United States government said that, created a law that said you could no longer import watches that said waterproof. Watches sold had to say something other than waterproof, because proof meant that exactly that. It was absolutely, positively waterproof, that there's no way water could get into it. And of course, you can't really guarantee that. Waterproof is more of a, a marketing term more than anything. They, with that law they passed in 68, compliance was required by 1972. And in 1970, Seiko began with their case models beginning, I think the case models that ended with a 9 were the ones they marked for import into the U.S. Beginning in 1970, they started either marking their dials and or case backs with water resist instead of waterproof. Other companies did other things, but and there's some transitional periods in there where you might have a dial that says waterproof and a case back that says resist. And that's what people are referring to when they say this is a proof model or resist model. And you won't find any proof models after, technically 71, I guess, was Seiko, maybe 72 in their, actually after 72, some of their domestic lines, they ended up, not just the United States import ones they did, but they ended up changing all of their production lines, including their domestic, in 1972. So, it, for the Seiko history folks out there that love that stuff, and I'm kind of one of them. I have a proof model 1970 UFO or Yachtsman. And those only existed for about 3 months before the change happened. So it's a very early variant that I'm really pleased that I got. But so this is a proof model. And with it being in 1968, they were all proofs in 1968. But that's what that's referring to. So we're continuing with the disassembly of the dial side here. And this is a cover plate that covers the minute wheel and the intermediate wheel. Go ahead and pull that minute wheel off, and there's the intermediate wheel. I'm just checking to see if it is directional. And although there is no chamfer cut to the teeth, the top of that wheel does kind of looks like it has an oil sink in it that does not appear on the bottom. So I'm just making a mental note of that to make sure I put it in the same way afterwards. Now we can go ahead and we got our cannon pinion removed. And now I'm going to go ahead and loosen these 2 screws on this setting lever spring and cover plate. And I'm just going to go ahead and break tension on this spring here and just lift it up on top of the setting lever. And now I can safely remove those screws without fear of this part flying into oblivion. Then past that, it's a pretty basic keyless works. And if I actually didn't mention it before, so this movement is a 6106A. It's a 25 joule movement. And it actually won't be 25 joules after we're done. A little foreshadowing there. But with that 25 joule, part of that really is just good marketing. You'll notice the dial on this thing said 25 joules. And on these 6105s and 6106s, same movements that was in a lot of these. It's basically the same movements in the Willard, except this one has a day function as well, but basically the same movement. They had 17 jewel versions, which it was cheaper tariff-wise to import into the United States with a 17 jewel than a 25 jewel. So on the 6106Bs, there's a lot of those that were imported in and to the United States, and those took less of an import tax because I had less jewels. But they would say, 25 jewel, and they would just, again, it's some kind of a marketing thing that a lot of watch companies did, and I'm sure some still do, where, it's one would think that the higher the jewel count meant the better quality of the watch. And although, it's not a bad thing, there's certain jewels in here that do absolutely nothing. So like if you saw on that cover plate we removed from the dial side of the watch, there's 2 jewels in there that are just pressed in, but not doing anything. They're just there for the sake of adding to the count. And if you'll pay attention to, as we remove this further, and especially once we get down to the main plate, you'll see a couple more like that. So there is 25 jewels in this watch, but there is not 25 functioning jewels in this watch. So, there's, we've had some before that are like that. I've worked on one that said like 35 jewels and, it had like 24 or 22 that actually did something. So we got the automatic works removed, and now we can remove power from the watch. So I'm pulling back on the click spring and then just using my screwdriver and letting it unwind between my fingers in a controlled unwind. And once we kind of get to the end, I'm just kind of give it a little twist there and make sure it's all there. And you can see that balance kind of come to a stop. So now we can go ahead and remove this balance and get it out of the way. So I don't want to take a chance on damaging anything by leaving it in there. So at my first opportunity, I'll go ahead and get this removed. And wow, I really got to dress these tweezers. As you can kind of tell those tweezers there. It's definitely time for them to be dressed. But it's kind of, I don't do that. I dress my screwdrivers religiously, but I'm really bad about my tweezers, and shame on me. But that balance spring looks to be in pretty good shape. So now we're going to go ahead and get this pallet fork removed. And by doing that, we'll do that by removing the 2 screws holding down the pallet fork bridge first. And while I do that, I would just like to take this opportunity to say thanks to everyone who sent me well wishes and all that. It really meant a lot. I'm sure most people who watch this won't have a clue what I'm talking about, but it's been a couple weeks longer than normally it would be between my videos. And I knew it was going to be kind of a break between videos because I had a work trip that I had to go on, and I got the video uploaded about a week before that work trip. And then I went on the work trip, and then the plan wasn't even to start on the next watch till after I got done. But I kind of fell ill that last day of the trip. And when I got back, I started to get worse. And by that Monday, I was a big hot mess. So, turns out I ended up getting COVID, which, since this whole thing started 3 years ago, I thought I had a couple close calls, but I ended up never catching it. And I thought I'd get out of this whole mess without having caught it. But guess what? That was not the case. And turns out a couple people that were on the trip, the work trip that I was on, ended up catching it. But so I put up a post on the community page and all that just to say, hey, I apologize for the regular viewers of the channel who are kind of used to seeing videos on a semi-consistent basis. But and I explained I got COVID, and I just had an outpouring of people wishing me well. So thank you again. So on here, I'm checking the in-shake of the barrel before we remove this barrel bridge, and you can see there it did not look all that great. There was a lot of play in that. That was too much. So we're going to go ahead and do a jewel upgrade on that. That could just replace that bushing, but the jewels that fit in this 6106, both upper and lower, are the same jewels that I've got. I think 2 sets of those left. Well, 1 set now. But the same jewels that do some of the Lordmatic 5606 and the 61 series movements, the 61, 38, and 39 chronographs, Although 6138, the lower barrel arbor port's already jeweled, but same jewels. So I've actually already got a set of jewels to do that. So we're going to go ahead and do a jewel upgrade on this watch, upper and lower, which will bump this thing up to 27 jewels, but it'll have at least the 2 jewels we're going to add actually are functional, unlike some of the other ones. So before we can pull this barrel out and the escape wheel out, we're going to go ahead and remove this center wheel bridge and get that out of the way. The barrel could squeeze out, but it's a real tight fit without doing that. So we're going to go ahead and pull this off. Here comes the escape wheel. And I'm just kind of eyeballing the pivots on these as I remove them. Here comes some hair. Whoever worked on this last had some gray hair. That's not mine, although I do have gray now. And I start trying to pull this up, and my tweezers are not in the best shape, but that is not wanting to lift up. And check that out. I'm going to draw an arrow there. Look at what's in that lower arbor port hole. I looked at that for a few minutes, and we'll go close up on it here in just a second after I pull this center wheel out. I thought it was maybe dried up grease, but it was reflecting light. Also, when I grabbed it with my tweezers here, and that's actually a brass shaving, which I have never seen before. Kind of off camera a little bit here. I actually played with it too, and it was not grease. It bent and held its shape that I bent it to. That was brass. So that's a new one. And because of that, I actually eyeballed the daylights out of that lower arbor port, or out of that lower arbor on the barrel arbor, to see if it was damaged. I couldn't find a scratch on it, which that thing is hardened steel, and it's going to, that brass main plate's going to wear before that does. But I double checked my barrel arbor, which my horrible brass tweezers here, having a fun time getting that out of there. I actually speed the video up just a little bit, but I fiddle with it for a minute, but there that arbor comes out. And now I'm going to go ahead and just unwind the mainspring, just like you see there. But I'll do that off camera. Here's our mainspring. And actually, this thing looks pretty good. A lot of people say, you should always replace your mainspring. And I get that on a lot of stuff. Seiko mainsprings are a little bit, they're kind of unique too. The bridles on the end are thicker than the standard part of the mainspring. And I find that if the Seiko mainsprings, especially the older ones, are in good shape, I will reuse them. They're good mainsprings, and you can't buy those. The only replacement mainspring you can get is an aftermarket, which does work, but I prefer an original if I can. But that one there looked good. We're going to reuse it. Now we can go ahead and disassemble this automatic works. So there's 2 screws holding that cover plate on. There's our first reduction wheel. That wheel is what connects to the ratchet wheel. And that's what connects the automatic works to the ratchet wheel. Now we can remove our paw lever. There we go. And that is our automatic works. And my blinding light. And when I have the microscope light all the way up, that's why it looks really bright there. It looks great through the microscope. But normal view, when you're seeing it normal camera, that microscope's, the light on it's turned down low. So here, got all the parts cleaned up, or pre-cleaned rather, and then we're going to go ahead and run these through the cleaners. I have not done any repair work yet on those barrel arbor ports, but I'm going to go ahead and get all these loaded up, and we'll put this through the first cleaning. And actually, I realized, I said earlier that, I had those jewels in stock. I only had one of the 2 jewels. I only had the lower jewel in stock. I had to order an upper. But here is my Elma cleaning machine. So the first cycle is a wash cycle. The next 3 are rinse cycles. So we put those in the rinse and run them, and I've got it cut out so you just see the ins and outs of it. But then we spin off the excess liquid between each one, and the last cycle is going to be a drying cycle, a heated drying cycle. But I went ahead and put these through the cleaner now and ordered the lower barrel arbor jewel. So while I wait for that to come in, I'm taking a look at this crystal, and it's not in bad shape. There's no cracks or anything with it, but there is some light scratching. So I'm going to go ahead and polish this here with a soft cotton mop, some green Dialux, and this will be the kind of the first stage. And I just take this crystal with this, and I do this for the main portion of getting most of the deeper scratches out. This won't do, with that green Dialux on there, it won't do fine work. We can use diamond lapping paste, or we can use Polywatch. Also works great too. But this is what I like to do to get the bulk of the work done. So I'll kind of run this through a few times, and I'm just kind of checking it to see how it looks. I can already tell it's kind of starting to heat up in my hands, which I have to, take my time with this to make sure I don't build up too much heat. But then I'll work this for about 10 minutes or so, and then I'll take some Polywatch over it when I'm done. And this crystal's not going to be perfect, but all the big scratches are going to be gone. So now my jewel came in. So what this is here, this is a stump I'm going to put in my jeweling tool, and that stump has an outer diameter of 6 millimeters. I don't even care about the inside. It's just the outside that I want. And that 6 millimeters fits in perfectly into that little recess. So that's what allows me to kind of hold this thing still. And kind of forewarning on this, when you're not filming and doing this, I'm a lot more graceful and steady when I'm not filming it. And I can have both hands in there, and you don't have to worry about getting a camera view in there. So that jewel is 1.60 millimeters wide. And so the barrel arbor port, I need to basically ream that out to 1.59, where that 0.01 millimeters is going to be the tension, the tension that holds that in. So I start with a 1.29 millimeter reamer, and then I work to 1.39, 1.49, and then end up with 1.59. So I'll do each reamer in a step, so I'm not taking out too much material, and I just got some 3-in-1 oil on the reamer. You can probably see especially when I get all the way down with the reamer, you can kind of see the oil kind of come up right there, and that's just 3-in-1 oil. And so I'll just work each reamer slowly, and once it gets down to the bottom, spin it a few times and just make sure it's, in there flush. And you can tell this 1.59 reamer is newer than the other. Those other reamers are probably 60 years old. This one here I bought last year because the very first time I ever jeweled a Seiko to 1.59, I broke the reamer because I didn't know what I was doing. So hence this different looking reamer. But as you can tell, I use this reamer quite a lot. So get that all the way down. And then the reamer, the top part of that past the blade, but just before that shoulder, that's actually what's 1.59 millimeters. So when it gets all the way down in there, that's why I'm spinning it a lot once it gets all the way down. And I'm just going to deburr these holes just with this little deburr tool, and it cuts in both directions. So just a couple quick spins and clean up the excess with Rodico. And I'll do that to both sides. And what I want to make sure of, and you kind of see it on the other side, I want to make sure that when I'm done though, I don't have any debris inside that jewel hole. And especially on this one here, because I'm going to press this jewel in from the dial side of the movement you see here. So that jewel is actually going to pass through most of the thickness of that movement before it gets into its final place. But once that's done, and I'm happy that I'm confident that I've got all the shavings and everything out of there, I'm going to go ahead and press this jewel into place here. And I'm just putting it in position and just pressing it down with my tweezers just enough to where it just doesn't move in the time it takes me to get it over to this jeweling tool. So that bottom stump in there, the inside hole of that stump is slightly smaller than the outside diameter of that jewel hole. And the pusher on the top is just barely smaller as well. And so what I'm going to do is push that jewel down, and the goal is to get it flush with the other side of the main plate. And I'm just pressing it down and basically till I feel it stop, and it's actually going to be touching that stump. And so here on the bridge, this one here is, we didn't have to machine this. This is just a bushing. So just using the appropriate size pusher and stump, we'll go ahead and just press that bushing out. And really there's nothing we need to do to this prep wise, except for, just we push the bushing out, and we do the same thing here with this jewel here. I'm just putting it kind of in its place and just barely pressing it down, very, very light pressure, because these jewels, they're very hard. They're harder than steel, but they're very brittle. So if I go pushing on it, especially if it, I'm pushing on it unevenly or something, I could easily crack it. And that's not what I want to do. So very light pressure, just getting in a place where it won't move when I move the part. And this pusher here is slightly larger than the outside diameter of that jewel. And since I'm pressing it on from the back side, the underside of that barrel bridge, I want that jewel to be flush with that bridge plate as a start. And as it turns out, it's barely not where I want it to be, which I'll learn that here in a minute. But I go ahead and I got the center wheel in, and I got the mainspring barrel in. And what I'm going to do here is just check in. Once I get it all tightened out, I'm going to check in shake. And right there, that's way too much in shake. And after looking at it closely, it is because my upper jewel needs to come down a little bit. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm pressing in from the top side and just pressing that jewel down about 3/1000 to 4/1000 deeper in there. And now we're going to go ahead and test this again. And this time that end shake looks pretty good. I'm sorry it's not as good as an angle as the first one. On this one here, I had my hands kind of in the way. But once that's done, I went ahead and took those parts that I was messing with and put those back through a cleaning cycle once again, once I was happy with everything. And while those are cleaning, I'm going to go ahead and get a couple of assemblies put together. We're going to assemble this automatic works, and then we'll assemble the mainspring barrel. And so that was HP 1300 that I put on there. Very liberal amount of that. And then we can go ahead and install our pawl lever and our first reduction wheel. I'm going to go ahead and pull the pawl lever out of the way so that can sit in there. And then our cover plate. That cover plate is held on by 2 screws. And the automatic works on this thing really is that simple. I'm sure you probably get tired of me actually saying it, but I'd say 40% of all the videos on my channel have had some variant of this automatic works on there. But it's popular for a reason, because even the grand Seikos they're building today, phenomenally nice watches, they have a modern version of that magic lever system. And from the 60s until now, they update it for geometry and different size to fit different movements, but the basic principle is still the same because no one's come up with anything better since. It just works that great. So we got some S4 grease in there as braking grease in the inside lip of that barrel. And now I'm putting some 8200 down there for the mainspring itself. So we got our mainspring wound up, and after a couple of videos ago when I snapped that mainspring, I learned my lesson. So I still haven't gathered up the courage to open it up and do another one on film, just because, my hands are there. I'm extremely careful doing those. But a little bit more 8200 on the top there. And I got one big smudge on there, but that'll work itself around. And then a little bit of lubrication on the inside lip for that arbor. And now we can go ahead and put on our arbor. I like to kind of rotate it in, but that hook on the arbor did not get into the spring, so I need to rotate it a little bit. There we go. Now that hook is set in place. And a little bit of lubrication on the top shoulder of this where the barrel lid is going to sit. And when that arbor rotates, where that's going to rub. So now we go ahead and we got our lid on, and we can go ahead and pop this lid on. And you don't have to have one of these tools, but they're very handy to have. They're very inexpensive, especially the off-brands. This is an off-brand tool. It's only a few dollars, but it puts even pressure on that lid. So, and just making sure that that lid is seated all the way around. So I got both the upper and lower balance tools clean, and this is just lubricating both of those. Went ahead and just did them both together. And now we can go ahead and put on our balance jewels in. So this upper one here, I kept the shots in here completely of putting these springs in. And just so you can kind of see, I've gotten really lucky, actually, on a few of the previous watch videos where, everything is just going in perfectly. And and these really weren't bad. I didn't lose a spring or anything. But you can see I fiddle with these a little bit more than I have on some of the other ones, especially the bottom the bottom spring. But for the sake of honesty and clarity, I just went ahead and left the entire shot in. But there is the bottom. jewel, and you can see that oil ring right there in the middle. And pretty poor job of spring placement. I was trying to be slick and kind of get one of those ears in, but whatever. So there we go. Now I got 2 of those feet in. It won't go away on me. And then there's the third one. Finally get that thing rotated around. Now we got our balance jewels in place. So I'm going to go ahead and just give this a puff of air and just take a look at this spring just to make sure it looks good and is breathing evenly. This balance actually looked real nice. And I really like these 61 series movements. They have big balance wheels. I like that a lot. And some of the 7000 series balance wheels, I mean, mechanically they work fine, but they're very small. I like these larger wheels. So I'm looking at this at a profile view, and I'm taking a look at the hairspring to make sure it's flat, which it looks fantastic. I'm also got in real close and checked the regulating pins to make sure that the spring looked good in there. And I'm checking the impulse jewel to make sure it's in line with the pallet fork and escape wheel jewels, and everything's looking really good. So everything came out of the cleaners looking good, so we can finally begin assembly of the watch itself. And while I get started on that, I would just like to take this opportunity to say a sincere and heartfelt thank you to members, the folks on Patreon who support this channel over there. Patreon is kind of a thing where if you're a podcaster or an artist or some weirdo working on watches in the Midwest or anything in between, you can support their efforts on there. On my Patreon channel, everything that comes in goes directly into the channel 100%. And I just would like to say thank you so much to those who have helped us out. So I'll just give a quick shout out to Donald, Darren, Matt, Andrew, Dale, Norris, JC, Danilo, Ben, Charles, and our newest members, Matt, Matthew, and Justin. Thank you all so much. Your support means an awful lot. And our newest members, I got your thank you packets in the mail. Hopefully you've received them by now. If not, as of this recording, you should have them anytime. And for those who are go and look at the channel, any member on there, regardless of what level you sign up at, you get a thank you packet in the mail. And that is the absolute least I can do. I try to keep fresh content on there and, just put some things on there that won't make it on YouTube, just to give you value. And I sure hope I'm trying my best to do so. So thanks everyone. I really appreciate your support on there. And if you want to check it out, info's in the description. So thanks again. So we're getting this wheel train put back together, and that odd looking part at the top of the screen there that I put on before the third wheel, that is the hack. And so one end of it on the right engages with the sliding clutch, and the other end, as that the crown is pulled out, it moves that lever a little bit, and it actually will end up touching the balance wheel and thus stop the watch. So that's why when you pull the crown out, the watch stops. That's that lever that does that. So we got the bridge put on, and I'm just doing a little tapping trick just to get that escape wheel pivot in there. That was the only pivot that looked like it didn't drop in at the very beginning, but there we go. That dropped in like a charm. So now we can go ahead and get these 3 screws that hold this bridge plate down put into place. And right now I'm just screwing them all the way down, but not tightening them at all. And we got the first 2 in. I'm just going to do a little cursory check here just to make sure that everything's good, which it looks like it is. And then I can go ahead and get the 3rd screw in and then get them all torqued down where they need to be. And it really looks like I'm cranking hard on those screws, but I'm really not. It's just my shaky hands and the video being so close in, but I'm snugging them. So now it's time to lubricate the wheel train. So put some oil, some 1300 on the upper barrel arbor port and the 3rd wheel, and some 9010 on the 4th wheel and the escape wheel. Actually, someone wrote a very long and detailed comment, which I really appreciate. And I guess they were a trained watchmaker, so I actually got a critique from a professional watchmaker, which I thoroughly appreciate. I know I'm not perfect, and he was very positive, very complimentary, but gave me some tips and said over oiling just a hair on the wheel train. So And on the when I'm doing the escapement lubrication on the pallet fork and escape wheel. So I'm trying to use a little bit less lubrication there. Easier said than done sometimes, mind you. But sir, thank you very much for your comment. I did read it a few times, and I really appreciate it. And thanks for the advice. And I know that I have kind of over lubricated sometimes, and even on some of those manuals, I've read that, because you have those like lubrication sinks in the jewels, and some of the diagrams and all that. And it has basically said it, I've seen a lot of those reference, putting lubrication in where it sits in that oil sink and it comes halfway up the height of the pivot sticking out. And that was my original goal. But I think that the reality of it is I needed less. So I've tried to do that since getting that comment, and seemed to work fine on this watch so far. So thank you again. So now this is a very odd angle. I'm trying my best to, and with me being a lefty and the way I have my camera set up, there's really not a good angle for me to do this lefty unless you want to look through the microscope, which I'm spoiled by these cameras, so I don't like using that microscope footage if I can avoid it, if I got a good angle on these. But trying to get that in there with my right hand, I got it close. But now we're working on getting this bridge put on, and I kept all this in one shot, and I need to adjust this pallet fork just a little bit. You'll see this bridge drop down here in a second. Oh, right there. Now that thing is sitting where it should. And I can go ahead and get the 2 screws for this tightened down. So I've already got them screwed in, and now I'm just tightening them. And there we go. So I put some wind in it just to check the action of the pallet fork, and it'll all look good. So now I'm trying to put the slightest amount of 9415 grease on that exit stone, and then I'm going to work that into 5 teeth. And it was a challenge to actually put that small amount on there. I mean, that is a tiny, tiny amount of grease. But I think that's more in line with the proper amount that I should be doing. I've never really had a problem, when I put a bit more on there on my previous videos. It may actually cost me a few degrees of amplitude. It's never really affected the running of the watch, though. But I think on these, I was able to get a much more proper amount of grease on there. And then now I'm just cycling in that 3rd set on the 5 teeth, and then just moving that pallet fork around a few times. Just working that in. And as soon as that balance fires up, I could do that for 20 minutes, so that balance can run for 15 seconds and do the same amount of work. So now it's time to put in the balance. Again, I'm going to keep all this in one shot. This one does not go in as easy as some of the previous ones. This is more in line with real life sometimes, because I've been really lucky on, I think, several of my videos. But this is what can happen sometimes. So I got that balance in, but it's just not there. I'm just slightly off. And right now I'm just trying to figure out which kind of direction I'm off in, making sure it's seated down. I figure I'd give it a little tap just to see if it did anything, and it didn't. And here I finally get that back down, and watch how this bounce stops. It turns to the left and just stops. Boom. You see that? And that's where it's overbanked, where it's hitting the outside horn of that pallet fork. So I'm going to lift that balance wheel over that pallet fork and try to manually seat it where it should. And then there we go. There we go. Now that thing's starting to fire up. And actually, if you kind of look close, you can see without that screw in there, see that whole balance cock just kind of wiggling. It's kind of, that's kind of surprised me, actually. I mean, that's a lot of movement on that thing, but we'll get that screw in there all the way down at first. Then I'll come back here and just torque it properly. There we go. Now that thing's starting to look pretty good. So I went ahead and added some wind into the watch. And normally when I'm doing my time grapher readings, I let this thing run in for 24 hours, but it was starting to get late and I wanted to just do a basic regulation. This thing's only been running about 30 minutes at this point. I really just dialed in just the most basic of regulation. This is absolutely in no way final. But what this tells me is, this kind of tells us if we have any problems to start. 215 is a very perfectly good amplitude for this thing. I mean, and this is not even remotely broken in yet. That lubrication has not worked its way around, so that's going to come up. But these are fantastic numbers. This tells me in this position that there's really not really any issues. I'm going to go ahead and rotate this around and let it run in this direction. And you can see amplitude basically stays the same. Rate kind of basically stays the same. It comes up a couple seconds at the end. But this is absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to let this thing run overnight from this point here, do some more regulation. And since this is a one-piece case, I'll do final regulation before I put it in the watch. But that was extremely early on. Normally I don't show it when it's that early, but it was late and I wanted to just, I was dialing it in and said, I'm just going to go ahead and take the video now. So I did. But following day here, go ahead and we're going to start with the assembly of the dial side. So I lubricated the post for that setting lever. And then that little part I put in there is what you pressed on is the release for the setting lever. So when you push down on that little dimple on the far right, it's going to press that setting lever up and remove tension off the stem. And that allows you to pull your crown and stem out. So we're getting that in, and then we got the sliding clutch in, and I'm just going to put some grease in here where the yoke is going to ride inside that sliding clutch. And a little bit of grease here underneath this post, and that is where part of the quick set mechanism is going to, the little arm for the quick set, it's going to ride right underneath that post. And that arm makes contacts with 3 different parts. So the first one here is it's going to make contact with the setting lever itself. So I'm going to put some grease right in there where those 2 points are going to meet. And then a gigantic glob of grease on my oil. That's enough grease really to do about a full watch, where the setting lever spring is going to go. And then lubrication for the yoke. And then some grease where the yoke is going to touch the main plate. And then I'm putting a little bit more grease on the edge of that setting lever where the yoke is going to contact it. That post on top is where the setting lever spring is going to go, and then the yoke touches the lower part of that part. Speaking of the yoke, then the yoke spring is all one part on these. So we're going to go ahead and get this pressed down into place. Move the setting lever out of the way a little bit, give me some room. And I need to go ahead and I'm going to press down on this and kind of press that around, get that yoke kind of put into the sliding clutch a little bit, get it in that groove. And I should note that that sliding clutch on the other side of that, we need to, when I put it in, I made sure that the hack, that little brass part that we put in earlier, that part sticks out on the underside of that sliding clutch, and I made sure that it was in that groove also. So we got the setting lever spring put on, and I'm just tightening these 2 screws, holding that down. And that is in place now. Just adding some final torque to that. And another gigantic glob of grease. I find it easier to apply the amount I want. And in this case, really, it's much more than I need in the parts where I want. And right here, too, I'm pretty heavy-handed with the grease on this stem. But I go back with some Rodico. I clean up some of the extra globs on this stem before I put it in, and I'll take some Rodico at a few points during assembly, and I'll go back and clean up all my excess on the rest of the keyless works and stuff like that. So it doesn't stay that way, but it's easier for me to just do it that way. So that's just the way I do it. So I'm putting this crown and stem in. Didn't want to go in at first, so I'm going to press down on that release just to give me a little bit of room, and there we go. Now the stem went into place. And another gigantic glob of grease, a watch's worth of grease. But I'm going to use a little bit of it and lubricate this point here on that quick set arm. And that's where the spring is going to connect into that. And a little bit of HP 1300 there on the post where that thing rests against. There's not really a whole lot of movement in there, but I just decided to go ahead and lubricate that post anyway. Because once you get that screw in place, I mean, that's really pretty much stays. There may be the slightest bit of movement there. But we'll go ahead and get that in. I didn't fully tighten it yet. We'll go ahead and set the spring in place. And this is easily the strongest spring in this watch. We'll get that put into place, and it needs to sit under that arm. There we go. Now I can tighten that screw down fully. And I'm going to go ahead and just check the quick set on that. There we go. And that spring is what presses back against the assembly and pushes the crown back out. There we go. You notice there too, it's kind of hard to see, but when I had that crown pulled out, you could barely see it from the underside, but that balance stopped moving. We'll clean up a little bit of the excess grease there. And now we're applying some more to the shaft of the second wheel, or the center wheel. That is what the cannon pinion is going to attach to, and those cannon pinions are press fit. So I'll just press that on. That gives a very satisfying click, actually, when it goes into place. And some HP 1300 here for the post and the raceway for the minute wheel and for the intermediate wheel. It looks like I didn't put in the edit for putting oil on that raceway, but if you rewind it there, you'll see oil magically appear there. So there's our minute wheel and our intermediate wheel with the oil sink facing upwards, just like it was when we removed it. I'll just fiddle with this and make sure that all these wheels are in place. Come on, Adam. Okay, fine. I got it. Now the cover plate can go on. This cover plate is held on by one screw. So we'll get this all lined up and get that screw put down into place. And that kind of keeps everything in place. It really keeps that minute wheel from raising up when you're setting the time on the watch. And I'm going to go through here again and just clean up a bit more of the excess grease. I did this a few times. Not all of them were on camera. Now it's time to assemble the rest of the motion works, which is really just one part, and then the calendar works. So just applying some lubrication at a few points. A little bit on the raceway there, just a tiny little dot. So this here is our calendar driving wheel, and that kind of assembly that's on there is kind of a spring assembly, and that you need that in there for the quick set, for the semi-quick set for the date, for the day rather. So when you wind it backwards, you're not damaging anything. And that spring is like when you see that day kind of jump when you go past midnight backwards, and it jumps and goes back to the same day. And that's that spring pushing that arm back into place. And so that's what allows you to go backwards without damaging anything, is that assembly on that calendar driving wheel. But we got the intermediate wheel on there and the hour wheel, and I'm just kind of messing with that into place to make sure that everything's kind of, all the gears and all those different teeth are meshed together. Now the date driving wheel can go on, making sure it's oriented properly on the calendar driving wheel. And that screw there is a shouldered screw, so I'm getting it started and just making sure that that shoulder is past the ridge on that part where it's not going to bind. And then I can go ahead and tighten it down fully. There we go. Next up is lubricating another part of that quick set arm, and where the actual quick set lever itself is going to go. Then those are the two contact points right there. And then I got a little bit more than I wanted on there, so I'm just going to clean up a tiny bit of that grease. There we go. Now I can go ahead and put this quick set arm in. And that just that little kind of U-shaped notch on the bottom right of that is what's going to touch this date wheel to turn it when you press that crown in. So we get the date wheel set down and put into place. And I'm just going to put a little bit of HP 1300 on this post here where the date jumper is going to go. And this one here should look familiar if you've watched any number of old Seiko videos where the jumper and the jumper spring is all one part. They had some also that were two pieces, but these are just infinitely easier to do. And I'm putting a bit of grease on the back side of that date jumper spring, where when I put it into place and it's going to press against that the main plate there is a slight bit of movement. That is a friction point. So we're just making sure that's lubricated properly. Then I got the excess cleaned up, and now we can put on our cover plate, which is held on by 3 screws. And you can see at about the 12 o'clock position and about the 7 o'clock position, those 2 jewels on that plate, those do absolutely nothing. They're just there to look pretty and let them legally claim that there is 25 jewels in this watch. And there was 2 or 3 more in the main plate that were the same way. But you see that jewel there? They're just, it does nothing. It's just there. Now I'm just checking this quick set. That looks to be working perfectly fine. And I'm applying a very slight amount of 9010 to both sides of that date jumper. And then I'm also going to do the same thing to both sides of the day jumper. And that day jumper is integrated into that cover plate that we just installed. But just a little bit of 9010 to both sides of that. Once that's done, we can put in our day wheel. It just goes on very simply. And I just line it up where I can get to that day jumper spring. And I have a little bit of a time getting it set in place, but come on, Adam. There we go. And now we can put on our clip, C-clip. And just, if you're doing these, just remember rounded side down, flat side up. And sometimes on those day wheels, it actually says that it's printed around the, on the inside of that wheel there. It'll actually say, rounded side down, flat side up on some of the parts. But just doing a quick function test of the semi-quick set and then just the regular rolling over the time, and that all looked great. So I pulled out that stem release, and now we can put in, and it kind of just gives us room to put in this dial spacer. That goes on real nice, and now we can put in our dial. And that dial is just gorgeous. Normally, like on the sunburst, you might see a pattern, radiate from the center and go out or something. Like everything converges at the 12 o'clock position, and it kind of comes out in rays from there. I really like that pattern a lot. So, got the 2 dial feet screws tightened down, and now I'm just taking a fresh, clean piece of Rodico and very lightly just going over the dial, looking at any spot that I can find, and if it comes up, it comes up. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I'd say 95% of them came up. So I'll do that, and then I go over it with a puff of air too, and make sure a few times before it's all said and done, I clean it. But we're lubricating that post for that first reduction wheel in the automatic works. Now we can go ahead and get this automatic works bridge installed. So it kind of fell right into place, and then I'm just going to go ahead and double check it here and spin this bearing, just to make sure that all the teeth on that first reduction wheel are engaged with the ratchet wheel, and that looked fine. So this is held on by 3 screws. The same process as before. We get them all the way down, and then I'll go back through and tighten each one individually. There we go. I'm applying a bit of lubrication to the top pivot for that first reduction wheel, and then a little bit of lubrication on the sides of that wheel there. And I'll go ahead and just kind of work that around a little bit. And I'm just double checking that that ratchet wheel is turning in the same direction, regardless of which direction I turn this bearing. And everything's looking really good. Just going to clean up just a tiny bit of little thing there that I saw. And applying lubrication to just a couple of the ball bearings on this. You don't need to do every one, and it'll work its way around. And now I can put in the oscillating weight. Trying my best to get it oriented as close to, correct as I could before I got it on, but I missed my mark a little bit. But this thing sits on a post, and then there's 2 screws that got to line up, so it can be a bit tricky. But there we go. Now we'll go ahead and get these 2 screws tightened down fully. And as I finish that up, I'd like to briefly talk about the status of the channel. And it seems like it was just yesterday, but I'd say a month ago, 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks, something like that. We did a giveaway on the channel to celebrate hitting 1,000 subscribers, and we serviced an old Hamilton that was a beautiful old watch. Very nice guy named Matthew won it, and he actually posted an unboxing video, which is super cool. But someone had mentioned in the comments, when's the next giveaway going to be? And so they suggested 5,000 subscribers. And that sure seemed like a long way off, to be honest with you. But, it sounded like a fun idea. So, what? We'll just, many Seikos as we do on this channel, we'll do a vintage Seiko giveaway. And so, and at the time, I didn't know if that's going to be a month or a year or how long it's going to take to get there. And I still don't. But as the time of this recording, I mean, we're already up to 3,300 subscribers, and we just did a 1,000 subscriber giveaway a month ago, or a little over a month ago. And by the time that giveaway was done, we were like 1,600 subscribers. So we basically doubled subscribers in just over a month, or just a hair more. And so that's amazing to me. I will say that I have sourced the next watch. I absolutely cannot believe that I'm going to give it away because it's so cool. And I've wanted one for myself for a long time, but 5,000 is one big number. And I'm really excited. I'm not even going to open the watch up. I've found the watch. I got it out of Australia. I got it shipped to me, and it's in my project drawer, and I'm gonna keep it secret until we get close to that mark. And I think y'all are gonna flip out when you see it. But it's one I would love to have for my own collection. But I'm gonna give this thing away, and I mean, the bracelet on it is super rare. It's so cool. So when we get close to 5,000, hopefully I can get that video done and be at 5,000 when we publish it for a giveaway. But I think you folks are really going to like it. I'm excited to do it. So FYI to everyone, the next watch, the next giveaway watch has been found. I have it, and it was not cheap, and it's going to take some work to get it to where it needs to be, but it is going to be sweet when it's done. So whoever wins that's going to be really lucky. We'll just say that. So I'm excited for it. So whenever that does get here, if it takes a year from now, well, then I'll just have that watch in the drawer for a year, as much as it pains me because I'd love to wear that thing. But yeah, so I've got to hunt down another one at some point for myself now. So we got final regulation done and everything else assembled. So here's the crystal, then the claw kind of grabbing that crystal. So we're time to finally case this movement. I got the movement in there and the lock ring in. I got the stem in with the crown. So now we're going to go ahead and drop this crystal in place. So getting this in there and then loosening that up, and that's not fully down, mind you. It's just kind of in there. So I'm going to cover this with a bit of plastic and then just use my press just to make sure that this crystal is down, seated properly all the way around. And that tension ring is, doing its job there. Yeah, that claw just kind of gets it close to where it needs to be, but I don't trust that as to be final. I just making sure we do the press that way, and the type of crystal this is, we know that's in there properly. So I did not have the original strap for this watch. I found this really cool looking, it's some sort of animal grain, black leather strap. I think it complements this watch really well. Again, this watch here, we just did a full service on this and a repair. I didn't want to touch the case. Although if I had a lapping machine, I would love to go to town on this case because every angle on this I think would complement a lapping machine. But it's in original condition. Now here's the finished watch. I think it's I love it. I love these cushion style cases. I think they look great. They're very comfortable. I think the strap really complements it. It's just really difficult to photograph. If I had a better eye for that, I probably could do better photographs, but I think this watch turned out fantastic. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the video. I really thank you for stopping by and watching. If you made it all the way to the end, kudos to you. If you like this content, I really would appreciate it if you'd like to subscribe. And thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.